Okay, we examine a couple things that related to what we have learnt in the previous years. Okay, one being there being some sort of regression line. So this word here, okay, very important. Whenever you see this word, it's talking about a line that goes through the data, and it's essentially a line that represents your data. So, for example, you've got a bunch of dots, and you've been learning about this last year about how to fit a line of best fit by eye, which means drawing a line through the data, okay, to represent the data, okay? But now, instead of just drawing the line by eye, we actually use an equation and an exact way to do it. And we also learnt about this word residual, okay? It's a residual is basically the space between the dots and the line. And the idea is you want to make sure you fit a line, okay, that has the least amount of space between each dot. But the formula that the calculator will give you essentially is going to be that line, okay? But we're going to examine how to draw that line. Now, the formula that I'm talking about as well looked something like this. This y equals mx plus c, which you would have learned last year, okay? But this year, we're changing it up to y equals a plus bx. And it essentially means the same exact thing. The only thing that's different are your letters. So instead of c, you're using a, which just represents the y-intercept. Instead of m, which was the gradient last year, you're going to use b, which is the gradient, like I said. X and Y, we've already learnt about this. X represents your EV, Y represents the RV, okay? And we learnt about how to put it in that calculator. So we're going to do that again today, but with this example, all right? So get your calculator out. We're going to put these numbers in, and I'm going to show you how to put this into our calculator. Okay, put this in the calculator. So if you've forgotten how to do it, remember, go to the home screen of your calculator. So if I go home, it should look like this. Okay, go to the first one, new. Okay, and then add lists and spreadsheets, which is number 4. And make sure you label your columns. It's always important to do that because if you don't, you're not going to be able to put any of your data in a scatter plot. So for that first one, we've got height, and the second one is weight. Okay, put your numbers in. So 177. Always double check that you've got the correct numbers. Okay, really important because if you don't, your data is going to be a bit off. In year 11, they're a little bit more forgiving if you get your numbers wrong. So let's say, for example, you get a wrong number here, and then your graph is way off, but then the rest of your answers relating to this wrong data is correct. We will still give you the mark, okay? That's still a thing. But in year 12, they're not as forgiving, okay? If you get even one number wrong and then everything else is incorrect, unfortunately, I don't think they'll give you the marks, okay? So you got to make sure that you're very exact with your numbers. Okay, so put your numbers in and then don't go on yet, okay? We'll continue together. So while you're doing that, I'll talk through the question. According to this, the first question is we need to state the EV and the RV. If you don't understand which one is the EV and which one is the RV, I would suggest you read the question because that'll give you the context of what is happening. So if you read this, it says the relationship of heights and weights in a group of people is investigated. The aim is to predict the weight from the height in the data is gathered below. All right, so people want to predict what the weight is based on the height. So even there, you can actually already tell the context is that the weight is going to depend on what the height is. So that means that the height should be the EV and the weight is the RV. So let's state that. Question A, the EV. So we go height is the EV. I would actually write explanatory variable instead. Okay, because you want to be exact with your answer. Right, so the height is EV and the weight is the response variable. Okay, it's always a good idea to be exact. Remember, even when we were talking about types of data like categorical, nominal, you don't write cat num or you don't write numerical disk. Okay, write the whole sentence or the full word so that the reader or the person that's assessing your work in year 12 knows exactly what you're talking about. All right, question B. Let's find the correlation coefficient. Now, that is not specifically in this chapter of 8F, but it was in chapter 7, 7F. It was in 7D and 7E, where we looked for the R value. Okay, so this part of the question, remember, correlation coefficient is referring to the R value. Pearson's correlation coefficient. All right, so the R value. So on my calculator, let's look for the R value. Put your cursor all the way to the side. Try not to highlight it or put it here because you might overwrite your data. So just put it to the side here. We go menu. Okay, number 4 for stats, number 1 for stat calc, and then number 4, so this one here, linear regression A plus BX. EV, remember the EV was the height. And you want to try and figure out what the weight was. So that's going to be the RV, which is the Y. There we go. Okay. All right, and my R value. So scroll down a little bit right there. 0.85. Okay, so it tells us here, I want this to 3 sig figs. Okay, 3 important numbers. So that means my R value is 0.850. Okay, remember any 0 at the end of a bunch of decimal numbers is going to be a significant number. Okay, this is not a significant, however, it's just a placeholder. But these 3 are the important numbers. All right, and then question C. We now need to find the equation. So remember, your equation for any formula is always going to be in this form. Y equals, write it here, Y equals A plus BX, okay? And what you're changing here is you're just changing A and you're changing B to whatever A and B is on your calculator. So you've got Y equals, and my A value was. Okay, if you look at your calculator, you'll see that A is negative 84.823. Just adhere as well to what it says. It wants 3 sig figs, so 3 important numbers. Negative 84.8. Okay, we'll go with that. Plus, and then we change the B value. So that's A. Then we change B. According to this, B is 0.867. And he wants 3 important numbers. So we'll just go with 0.867. Okay, we don't need to round it because that 2 will not affect that 7. And then X. All right, remember last lesson, I mentioned as well, you cannot leave your formula like this as your assessors will not want you to leave it like this. The last things you've got to change are X and Y, but change it based on what the variables are for the EV and the RV. So remember, EV is your X, RV is your Y. So that's all you got to change. Here, height was X. So in my formula, change X to height, and we're going to change weight, Y, sorry. Oops. Change weight, Y to the weight. Okay, so on my formula, really straightforward. It's going to be weight is equal to negative 84.8 plus 0.867 multiplied by the height. Okay, you want to make sure your formula is always in terms of what the variables are. Do not leave it as X and Y. You must make sure that it's what the formula is or what the variables are. Cool. All right, does that all make sense? I hope. Yep. Cool. All right, it's recording, so you can watch this again if you need to. All right, so last lesson, we're gonna redo this, but we'll do it with the other. Actually, there's only one example here, isn't there? No. Okay, we'll use this example. Oh, beautiful. All right, we're gonna do this. Use this example. All right, to be able to draw our lines. Okay. So now, what I mentioned last lesson was using your start and end point. It kind of does relate here, but instead of using the start and end point that is given here on our graph, you got to make up your own start and end points. Okay, and that's really easy, and I'll show you how. Firstly, remember on your calculator as well, let me just quickly do this. If I change this into a graph, okay, let's say, you can watch me do it if you want, but you can follow me as well. Changing this to a graph, you go Control I, add data and stats, put the variables in. So we know that height was the EV, and we know that weight down here was the RV. Okay, there's your graph, but we need to put a line here. If you forget how to put the line in, you go Menu, Analyze, number 6. So Menu 4, 6, and then we go to number 2, A plus BX. That'll put the graph in for you, which is lovely. Okay, but you can't just copy this exactly. What we've realized that assessors would like you to do is that they want you to use 2 points in the graph to draw that straight line. And you only need 2 points. Okay, so let's figure out how to get those 2 points. Here is my formula. Okay, right there. Weight equals negative 85 plus 0.87. Lovely. Okay, what you need to do is pick any point you want on the graph, but that's not already these dots. Okay, any point. So what I'll do is I'm going to write my formula. Weight equals negative 85 plus 0.87 times the height. Now, what you want to do is when I say pick any point, you need to pick a point either on the x-axis or on the y-axis and substitute it into either the EV or the RV. So let's say, for example, I want one of my points to be somewhere in the 165. So on my formula, if I'm picking 165 as my point, okay, I have to change height to 165 here. Okay, substitute it. So that means weight, if we use, actually, let me write it here. So if we use 165, okay, if I use 165 as my height, so I'm going to put it into my formula. Weight is equal to negative 85 plus 0.87 times the height, okay, of 165. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to tell me exactly the coordinates if my height was 165. Okay, so on my calculator, I'll leave that up for you guys so you can look at it. On my calculator, okay, I'm going to open another calculator here, so another window. Put this formula in your calculator, okay, that. So just go negative 85 plus 0.87 times 165. And what that does is it gives us the other point for our coordinates. So it's 58.55. So weight is going to be 58.55. So that means my first dot on my first point is going to essentially be these two. Okay, the height and the weight. Putting them together, the coordinate is 58.55, 165. Sorry, it's 165, 58.55. So 165. And then 58.55 is probably about here. Okay, there's my first point. Okay, so the coordinates for this, okay, so putting all this together, the coordinate was 165, 58.55. That's one coordinate or 1 point. Now we pick another point. So you can essentially do the same thing, okay, and pick another point. So let's say maybe I'm going to use 175, okay? So let's change my EV to 175. All right, so let's try that. Sorry. So let's see if height was now 175. So again, using that formula, I'll just change the color so it's not too confusing. Okay, let's see what happens if height is 175. So I go weight is equal to negative 85 plus 0.87 times the height now of 175. Okay, so do that in a calculator. Negative 85 plus 0.87 times plus, I know it is times, I bet, 175. So 62.25. 62.25. So that means the other coordinate So these two together is going to be 175, 62.25. And we can plot that on our graph now. So 175 is here, 62.25. So that's going to be 61.2. Let's say it's about here. About there. Okay. Now, I've got my two lines, which is lovely. My two dots, sorry, which is great. And then from there, I can draw my line, and that should be all good. All right, so your two dots, you're there. You just basically, from here, all you got to do is just do a line like that. Now, it may not look to scale, or it may look a bit funny, but what we've realized the assessors want you to do is you need to use 2 points in your graph to draw the line, okay? And that's essentially any point that you want, just substitute your formula or your numbers into the formula, okay, to find out what those 2 points are going to be. Does that make sense? It makes sense. It is a bit tedious, but what they've realized is they don't just want kids to copy what they see here. That's why. Because if you copy this as you see, what that's telling us is you're not understanding, okay, where the spacing on the lines and that sort of thing. Okay, they want you to be able to at least draw, and it's the stuff that you would have learned in linear. How do you draw this formula? Okay, you just essentially need 2 points for these. Okay. All right. Any questions, guys? Any questions? No questions? All right. Now, on a scatter plot, I think I've already shown you how to do this, so that's pretty straightforward. We're going to skip this for now because it's not necessarily something you need to know in year 11, but you might be learning it in year 12. All you need to know, and which I think you guys understand, is how to get the formula on your CAS. So to do that, remember, put your data in and then menu 414. Put your EV and RV in. So once you've done that, you've got height, you've got weight, lovely, yep, okay. And here, you've got your A and your B for your formula, okay? And you just substitute that into your Y equals A plus BX. And that's basically how you do your formula. Alternatively, if you also do that and then put your data in a scatter plot like this, and then you put your line through. So let me show you guys how to get the scatter plot. So for the scatter plot, we go menu, Control I, data and stats. Remember what's your EV, so it's height, and your RV, which is weight. Okay, and then you put your line in. So to do the line, menu, analyze, regression. Okay, and then A plus BX, which is that one there. And then that'll also give you the formula, which is essentially the same thing as what it should have here for your A and B. Cool. All right, any questions?